Hello there and welcome to our program on email business etiquette. This is a very large subject indeed, and in this particular session we are going to take a look at email policy. What policies do you have in place about how you operate with emails in your organization? Or maybe there is no policy in place at all. I'd just like to open with this story about emails and email policy. Some time ago, a big story broke in New Zealand about a woman who was fired because she had yelled at customers and co-workers via email by typing all caps and bolding certain words in red. It turns out that this woman was perceived, or she was known to be, quite confrontational, which added to her email's negative perception. But the thing is that since the company that fired her didn't have an email policy in place, the court ruled that there were no rules in place to use as a basis for firing this woman, and the court awarded this particular woman over $12,000 in damages. Sounds quite amazing, doesn't it? So, the moral of the story is what? It's quite simply this. If you run a business, you must have an email policy in place that you can go through with each and every employee and have them sign that after your review, give them a copy and put a copy in your files. This is absolutely essential to do, based on the story that I just highlighted to you. If you don't let employees know what's expected of them and what is accepted practice from your company's point of view when representing your business via email, then you can't fire them after the fact if you don't like what they do. So this means that an email policy really is there to safeguard you. In the scenario that I highlighted in the opening, that company that the woman worked for had no safety catch, had no safeguard to protect them against her actions. And because they weren't able to protect themselves, they had to pay her for the damage she did to their client base and their company. Now that sounds quite ridiculous and it sounds very, very unfair, doesn't it? But unless you begin to look at these issues when it comes to emails and the amount of emails you are using now in business, it is phenomenal. It is actually the way most businesses are operating through email for their communication. So if you don't start to begin to look at this, your company may end up one day paying or having to pay a lot of money to someone who's caused damage to that company. So think about this very, very carefully. And as a manager, as an executive in your organization, do go and check it out. Ask yourself the question, have you got an email policy in place? It could be that you do. It could be that it's a good one. It could be that it needs a lot of review and it needs a lot of attention given to it to make sure that it's a very workable one and very effective for you. If you don't have an email policy in place, then now is possibly the time that you should start to look at it and recommend that your company does indeed do this. No one wants to have to pay damages unfairly. And companies certainly, this day and age, can be up for all sorts of damages and costs that can escalate into huge numbers. So do be very aware of the moral of this story. Put an email policy in place to protect your organization. The first step towards professionalizing your email communications is, of course, to publish a corporate email policy. So this email policy that you now have or you're going to have in the future will accomplish 3 objectives. There are 3 parts to it that is going to be very beneficial to your company. It will have a commercial objective. This means that in teaching employees how to send effective emails and stating target answering times, for example, you can professionalize your email replies and therefore gain a competitive advantage. If you use this in the right way, you can actually come out on top. You can come out with an advantage over your competitors because you have taught your employees how to be very effective with emails, how to follow protocol and policy. How to professionalize your emails will certainly bring great rewards to you in the end over your competitors because your teams are working very effectively and they have a very clear commercial objective in their minds. Email policy also has a productivity objective to it. So that means because you are setting out rules for personal use of email, you can improve productivity and avoid misunderstandings. So that means when people know that they can't really use personal time or use your emails at the company headquarters for personal use, then that means that you gain more benefit. You're not going to have people wasting time sitting there and playing on the internet or searching the web or writing emails that can have a bad image to your customers or other people. So make sure that there's the productivity part. This is the objective of any good email policy. You're going to gain in the end because you're going to eliminate a lot of unproductive use of time. And therefore we come to the legal objective. The legal objective is very good because if you clearly state what is considered as inappropriate email content, you can minimize the risk of lawsuits and you can minimize exactly what we talked about in the opening scenario here, having to pay damages unnecessarily. So every email policy has a legal objective attached to it. It is meant to protect the employer. It is meant to limit and minimize the employer's liability by showing that the company did warn employees before about inappropriate email use. So this is quite simple. There are different objectives to having an email policy. Commercial, productivity, and of course the legal objective. So ultimately, email policy is really a very positive thing for any company or any corporation to instill and to initiate in their structures. You will find that all major organizations today definitely have email policies in place because of the very nature of email. Email is everywhere now. Email can impact everything we do in business mostly, and therefore businesses now have to protect themselves thoroughly from any inappropriate use of email. So before you do start to create your email policy, it's important that you do actually do some investigation on existing company policies that you may have in place. For example, you may have existing guidelines on writing business letters and what is the proper format and what are the things you can and cannot say, etc. You may have existing guidelines in place on accessing confidential information within the company and also personal use of telephone systems. Many companies have these policies already in existence because we've been with the telephone for many, many years. There may be policies that say you can't ring family during business hours, or you can't use your mobile telephones in the office. There are policies that companies do put in place. And there are also policies in place about sexual or racial harassment in the workplace. So, having said that, take a look at what policies your company has in place already. And it's important that your email policy is compatible with these existing policies. It may be that you need to review a lot of the policies that you have got in place because they were written a long time ago and need to be updated to be up to date with the times and what is happening in today's world. So take a look at existing policies and make sure that your email policy you're going to create is compatible with it. You will also have to decide, and this is a point that many companies need to really think through very carefully, whether they are going to allow personal use of the email system. It could be that they may allow a certain extent of usage for personal usage. And if they are going to allow that, to what extent will they allow it? Some companies are a little bit flexible in this regard. So it may be that your organization could be one of those, or it could be that you completely cut totally any personal use while people are in their workplace, any personal use of the email system. So these are things you need to begin to think about when you create your email policy. And the email policy needs to be drafted with the help of human resources, with the help of your IT department, of course, and also the board of directors, because it needs to be able to reflect all viewpoints of the organization. That's important. It shouldn't just be written from one viewpoint, from one particular department's perspective. It needs to have quite a few different departments, especially those that are very relevant to formulating policy. It needs to have all of those departments involved. And when you are drafting such a policy, then it's important to get feedback as well, and to have several employees who are specifically selected to read through the draft and to give their feedback on what they consider are their views on that point or this point and so forth. When formulating your policy, I think it's also a very important thing that it will not restrict or compromise the productivity or the morale or the, good intentions of your staff. You do not wish to infringe on them as people and as valued members of your organization. So be very careful not to make it too draconian or too forceful and too restrictive in terms of freedoms, so to speak. So this is how to begin with your email policy. Create one, create a draft first, and get people involved. Make sure that you can begin the process in a very fair way by including several people, several areas in the drafting procedures. And that way you can then fairly ask for selected people to give feedback on each point of the draft. So what should be included in email policy, in an email policy that's going to help your company have that very important safeguard against wrong usage? Well, for the policy to be very effective, it should be a document that is clear, and it should be a document that is simply worded. And the wording, in many respects, should not be more than 3 to 4 pages in length. I think that you can cover all aspects of the email policy that you need to go through in 3 to 4 pages. You cannot expect employees to read a very long and complicated document because you're not really going to be wanting them to remember what it says. They need to be able to recall certain parts of that email policy. And therefore it is best when you are drafting this policy not to make it too long and not to make it too complicated. Perhaps one of the best ways that you can do this is by listing things in bullet point format. And that way you can easily find the rules and you can highlight things very clearly so that everybody concerned can quickly refer to different parts of the email policy. I have in the past seen many documents drawn up that are very, very lengthy indeed. And when that happens, employees tend to think that there are so many rules that they don't have any rights whatsoever. And it gets very, very complicated and very frustrating actually to be able to look through a document of this nature. People do have to feel that they still are respected and that you do trust them to a certain degree. So if you try to write an email policy that's the size of a book, then you're going to lose a bit of that respect actually. Make the document, as I said, a simplified one, a user-friendly one that people can navigate very easily to find the pertinent point of the document or of the policy. For the commercial objective of the policy, which we referred to earlier, there are certain guidelines which have a commercial objective to them. And this could be on how to write effective emails. These are points, for example, that you can highlight in your email policy. You could begin with the corporate email style, whether indeed the email should be formal or informal. And here, this particular guideline could include ways of opening and greeting people and ways of ending people. Some companies do have set procedures as to how they do this and how they want to be perceived by the receiver. So therefore, in your email policy, it might pay that you wish to highlight the corporate email style of salutation and ending messages as one of your critical points in the commercial objective. Next up, it could be that you would like to indicate what kind of signing off signatures should be used. Here, when I say the word signature, I don't mean your actually handwritten signature. I mean how you sign off. That's another way of terming your signature. So what information should your company include in their signature? Perhaps it should just be the company name, the job function, telephone and fax number, address, website, and a corporate slogan, a credo, or just the slogan. It really is up to you and to the type of business that you are in. And in trying to determine this part of the guideline, perhaps you can take a look at what other companies are doing when it comes to their signature. Are they indeed putting colour in there? Does it look good? Really look around and see what you've been impressed by, and that may be something that you can use as a guideline as to what your particular email policy does in terms of the signatures that you use. There are also the basic rules on how to write email messages that you need to stipulate so that everybody is really very, very clear on this point. Whether or not they can personalize things, whether or not they can make it very lengthy, etc. So you do need to write some guidelines in respect to this. Another point that's a very good point to help people follow email policy and to also be very productive as well commercially is to list down the expected time in which emails should be answered. For example, some companies, and you could say this as well, say that an email should be answered within at least 8 working hours of that email being received. But 50% of emails should be answered within 4 hours. These are specifics that you need to be able to put in place so that you are covering yourself, and this is a very commercial aspect of your email policy because You are dealing with customers. You want to project the right image when you're dealing with people who buy your product. Therefore, stipulate how long the time should be before you reply to an email. If it's anything over, for example, 8 hours, then that's showing that your staff are not actually following the email policy procedures that you put in place. Another guideline that you can put into your policy is how to determine which emails should receive priority. It could be that certain customers who are your major customers, they receive priority over other particular customers in certain areas. So this is also important in establishing an email policy. That way, staff are very clear as to how they should look at customers who send in emails, which customer is prioritized, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Other guidelines for your email policy is when to send copies, when to send blind copies, when to send messages, and what to do when you receive them. So this is another effective thing you can do towards establishing an email policy. Also, how and when to forward email messages. How do you actually forward email messages on to people? What is the correct policy? And how should you handle messages that have been forwarded to you? This may take a very long time to go through, and this may sound like it's a very tedious task. However, once you've begun to set these things in place, then it becomes very easy to follow. It becomes very clear. People really want to know when they should CC somebody or when they should blind CC messages. And so, it's important that you stipulate this so there are no misunderstandings. The ultimate aim of an email policy is really to make sure communication flows very smoothly. In looking at email policy from how to use the email system so you have greater productivity, there are also these guidelines that you can look at. You need to determine whether or not personal emails are accepted in your incoming system. And if so, to what extent? How many emails are you going to allow, or personal emails will you allow to be accepted? It could be that you could limit the number of emails that are sent each day. Personal emails, that is. Or you could require that personal emails be saved in separate folders. So then people can look at those personal emails in another time when it's not infringing upon their work time. You could also limit or eliminate certain email attachments from being sent or received as well. And another thing that you can do in terms of personal emails is to include rules on sending chain letters. Chain letters are a particular concern, and they come in huge volumes, and these are things best to disregard. So I think you do need to set up some policy about chain letters. When you set up this sort of policy on personal emails, include examples and clear measures taken when these rules are breached. Let people know what's going to happen if they don't follow this policy, particularly on personal emails. It's very important that you make this clear. Then it's there in black and white for everybody to be able to see. And there are no questions going unanswered. Nobody can say, well, I didn't know that. You didn't tell me. They can't react that way. In terms of personal emails, they should be clear on everything. And this will be written in black and white in your email policy. Next up, in terms of using your email system, your company email system, look at the use of newsletters and news groups. If you wish, you can request the user to request permission to subscribe to a newsletter or a news group. This is one way of safeguarding your company and just instilling some very good practices. that make things a little bit formal. So this requesting permission to subscribe to a newsletter or a news group can be clearly stated in the email policy. Also, you can warn users that they should not engage in non-business activities that unnecessarily tie up network traffic. So these particular aspects of how to use the email system are very important ones, and they can be very effective as part of your email policy. This way, nobody is unsure. Nobody can say that they didn't know what they should and should not do. After all, this is the total objective of the email policy, so that you have smooth functioning of your email system. So we have talked about guidelines on how to write effective emails to gain very good business responses, and you need to set those out very clearly, as I've just previously stated. It can take time, but it's a very good exercise, and once it's done, it's there in place, only to be reviewed from time to time. Next up, look at your email system and how you can put together some very good rules on the usage of that system, so your company's system doesn't suffer. And finally, let's take a look at some guidelines on inappropriate email content and the risks of some emails. So you need to include in here, and this is the legal aspect, you need to include a list of email risks so that the users, your employees, are aware of the possible things that can go wrong because of their actions. You need to let them know very, very clearly the consequences of their wrongful doing, and advise those users that sending an email is like sending a postcard. If you don't want it posted on the bulletin board, then don't send it. So they need to know very carefully that whatever they send is going to be public. It's going to be used by people all over. It is not private. They need to be able to see that everything from their actions is going to be seen by other people. So this is a risk of potentially harmful emails, and it can really end up taking somebody to court when this kind of thing happens. The policy should expressly state that the email system is not to be used to create or distribute any offensive kind of messages or any messages that are disruptive to business, including messages that talk about race or gender or age or sexual orientation, or any of those other things, political or religious beliefs, etc. It's important that employees understand this. The tones and the content of their email must never really touch on these particular subjects. And employees should understand that if they do receive any emails with this content, that they should report the matter to their supervisor immediately. This is something that is very, very important. There are a lot of people out there sending messages that contain offensive content with regard to those particular subjects just highlighted here. And it's important that you have a system whereby the content of these sorts of messages can be reported to. You can keep a track if any of these sorts of emails do come into your system. It's also a good point to note that employees shouldn't get on emails to discuss competitors and to discuss whether their competitors are good or what their situation is, or give any information about competitors or possible mergers or acquisitions by your company. They should not be giving this information or be giving their opinion about this in their emails to another recipient. This is very, very important. Sometimes, of course, these things can be discussed in person. Sometimes people verbally discuss these things. and it goes no further than that. They can be discussed in a confidential manner. But however, when you do discuss these things in writing on email, they no longer remain confidential. They become public news. And this can also cause perhaps a customer who feels he has been spoken about in a very negative way, or your company has breached some confidentialities. Here then, that customer could take you to court over this. They could slap a lawsuit on you for improper dissemination of information about them. So unlawful messages, such as emails like this, should be prohibited at all costs. Always include in your email policy examples of the clear measures you are going to take when these rules are broken. Just as you have done with personal use of your email system, also do this when it comes to the way people may talk about customers or talk about possible business ventures by the company that should not be leaked. Always put down in writing what will happen if these things are breached, if these points are not considered and adhered to. This makes your email policy very powerful and a very substantial document that is worthy of being in your organization. It is there to protect the organization, and also, in a way, it is there to protect the employee. Don't forget that the employee does need protection, and it can protect them as well. If you are going to monitor the content of your employees' emails, you must make this very clear in your email policy. You must state this. People need to know if their emails are going to be looked at or read at any time, and they need to know this because they could get quite offended by it. People may see that this is an infringement on their privacy, and they may not actually want to work for the organization that does this. In most countries, companies are allowed to monitor their employees' emails if their employees know about it. This is a very valid point. So on joining a company, or if you are indeed in your existing company, do you know whether your emails are monitored? Do you know whether somebody can read your emails? Or do you not know about this? It might pay for you to find out exactly what the situation is. It is interesting to note that sometimes when you ring a customer service call center, you do get a message saying to you that this call will be monitored for improvement of service and customer service feedback. You do sometimes get that message when you call certain companies. So that is making the customer very aware that what they are saying is going to be recorded and it can be used later and it will be listened to later. So once a customer is aware of that, a caller is aware of that, that's fine. Now you can either choose to proceed or you hang up. When it comes to your organization and the policy that your organization is putting in place, then it's important that you know what the situation is. What is the real situation? Warn employees that they should have no expectation of privacy in anything they create or anything they store or send or receive on the company computer system, and that any of their messages may be viewed without prior notice. You don't have to tell them that you're going to be looking at their message. You don't have to tell them at all. You are within your rights in that organization because of your email policy, and they have read and signed off on the policy to be able to view emails at any time. So this is a very important point to have and to remember, and to always let the employee know what the situation is. If you want to make it a very good policy, then it's important to include a point of contact for questions arising from the email policy. Let people be able to express their views and their concerns about this. And that means that you are being more open-minded with the way that you conduct your business in terms of your email policy in your organization. Let's take a look now at publishing your email policy. All right, you have gone through and you have formulated it. You have looked at it from different perspectives. You've looked at the commercial, the productivity, and the legal objective that you need to meet with your policy. And now we can say that when you formulated your email policy, you should make sure that all employees are aware of it. You need to publish it. So you can do this by handing out printed copies of it. You can do it in various ways by putting it up on your intranet and also including it in staff handbooks. This means that the information is open. It's there for your employees to see. It's nothing that's hidden. They don't have to go and ask for it. When people have to go and ask to look at the email policy, that doesn't say very much about your openness in terms of your culture. So you do need to let people have it freely available. Furthermore, when somebody starts as a new employee in your organization, then this employee should be given a copy of it as a standard document in their new handbook, as a standard document they see at their boot camp when they first start working with your company. So publish it. Make it public to your staff to whom this refers. It is also a very good idea to include most of the important points in the employee's employment contract. That means that when the employee signs their contract, at the same time they are very aware of what they need to follow in terms of your company's requirements and email policy. They must sign that they have read it, that they have understood it, and they acknowledge that they have actually received that policy. This really safeguards you. This means that there is no doubt that that person has been informed of how your company thinks that they should operate. This person should operate with emails within the company. So cover most of the important issues in the employment contract. And those important issues are the personal use of email, the fact that they will possibly be monitored using email, and the prohibition of negative, defamatory, sexual or racist remarks in emails. These are three main areas that you could include, as I said, in the employment contract. And indeed, many companies are now doing this. They have reviewed the way that their contracts are written so that they can make everything very clear about email policy right from day one, right from the day that somebody signs up to be a member of that organization. And the other point to follow on and be sure about is that you include what will happen if these regulations aren't followed or this policy isn't followed, and that this can lead possibly to termination of employment. In the drafting of your policy, these things are part of the normal procedure that you should include as we have gone through. So this is in no doubt how you stand in terms of email usage and the policy your company wants to follow. There should be no doubt in the mind of the employee as to exactly what you require and the rules you wish them to follow. It is also worthwhile thinking about this next thing that you can do with existing employees and with new employees. You can organize email trainings to explain the email risks to your users and why the email policy is important. So you don't have to just worry about having this email policy circulated and signed off by everybody and only new contracts that are signed. You can, as an ongoing thing, periodically arrange email trainings. And this is a very good way to see that you are, as a company, very open with your staff. and you see it as a very important part of your standards and your procedures. If the users understand the potential threats to them, then most of them will understand why the rules need to be set up. And they will have a good feeling about it, actually. They will have less difficulty in applying these things. They will actually be more supportive of the company because they will start to see the company's point of view in terms of protecting itself against problems that can come up, court cases, damages, etc. So be open with your staff on this. And you can also gain valuable feedback to ensure that the policy is very workable, very feasible, and that it can actually work. So once you have drafted your policy, also gain feedback at that stage, but also later on, once you have published it and you have decided that you will have trainings where people can attend information sessions on the policy, then at that time as well, listen to the feedback, because people are thinking all the time about these things. Feedback is meant to help you improve what you do. And therefore, you may get some very good ideas from staff. You may also get some questions, you get some discussions, maybe some heated arguments as well about that. But I'm sure if done in the right way, then you will see that people will be very supportive of the policy, and they will follow it. Once you have your policy in place, then it is important that from time to time you do review things. And not only from that perspective, but from the point of view that the internet is changing rapidly, and developments in email and the internet are also coming about all the time. It's important to review email policy at least once every 3 months. Once every quarter is a comfortable period of time in which to do this. As you know, in technology, things are always being revealed, always being demonstrated in different ways, and there are new systems in place, there are new problems that come up, and all of these things need to be looked at and monitored. Indeed, you have to have perhaps a specific area that does take care of new developments in email and the internet, so that they have the responsibility of updating your email policy. You yourself can keep an eye on these developments as they happen, and also stay in touch with different forums and different sites which talk about internet law, so that you are aware of new regulations and new opportunities. Sometimes you may also as well be able to get some video clips or some documentaries on problems that happen with email and internet use. And it can be important that you catalogue these and use these in your trainings to vividly highlight what problems are actually happening in this situation using email and internet. When your staff see these video clips in their trainings, then that has great impact, and it can be very powerful in trying to convince them to be very, very concerned about this issue. So keep an eye on new developments. And also, when you release new updates of your email policy, it's good that you have everybody acknowledge this new update. Just like you might amend something in a contract, that amendment has to be signed off by the people involved. So also, as you release new updates to your email policy, get something signed by the email user of receipt of this particular update. Then you have everything in place and you are covering all aspects of the email policy that you want to serve in your company. This is a very important point. If somebody doesn't sign off on an update, if it is not logged and recorded, it could be that user may in the future say that they were not aware of it, and therefore they can create all sorts of problems for your company. So anybody who is involved in initiating the email policy and indeed monitoring it and having everybody sign off on it, those people who are in HR, of course, and who would be involved in keeping the records on this, please make sure that they do see that every update has a signature of acknowledgement on it. Enforcing the email policy, this policy that you have designed, that you have published, and that you have now updated or are updating regularly. When you have created this wonderful email policy, you must monitor your emails to ensure that your users keep to the rules. You have to be able to follow up to make sure that, okay, you know that people have signed off on it. They have acknowledged that these are the rules. So now you need to make sure that in your monitoring process, you do just that. There are many email monitoring tools available in software that can help you accomplish this. So it would be good if you can ensure that your IT department makes those available and that you put them into practice and set them up so that periodically you are able to monitor how things are going. Certainly you do hope in this session on email policy, you certainly do hope that your staff agree with the policy and that they follow it out of just being respectful and just being professional. That is the best way to ensure that all the regulations that you have in your policy are indeed followed. And this comes with the way that you inform this policy to your staff. In summing up this particular section, it does need to be said that you need to communicate very fairly and in a balanced way the policy that you have in place. Your HR department needs to be very careful and needs to be very firm also at the same time as to how they communicate this policy to the employees of your organization. You yourself, as a manager of a department or as an executive, a senior executive, needs to be fluent with the email policy. You need to know it. It would pay that you keep it in your dossier of documents at your workplace or in your files on your desktop so that it's available to you at your fingertips. And indeed, as part of your role, I would think that you need to look at it every now and then, put it into your priorities and your to-do list periodically so you can stay up to date with issues that may come up from time to time. That way, people will know in your department that you are in tune with what's going on, that you are aware of the email system and how things should operate. You may be a senior member of your organization, and quite often more junior members of staff may think that you don't know emails, you don't really understand the ins and outs of the email system because you're older, you were not a graduate of computer engineering or something like that. They may think that you're not savvy, that you're not knowledgeable of this thing. So it's up to you to make sure you let them know that you are. Yes, as a senior manager, you are indeed aware of what is important in emailing and of the important items and parts of your email policy. I do hope that you have been able to gain some very good information in how to create an email policy, or if you do have a policy, in how to go back and look through that policy and start to realize what are the valid areas of it and maybe what are the areas that you can give your feedback on to ensure that it is a very good and effective policy. Thank you once again for your time, and please go ahead and apply these things in your workplace, back in your company. Thank you very much for your attention.